Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It is Chris and Ben and Milton. We got the full crew here in the heat of the summer for episode 160 of Outer Rim Transmission. We are talking all about the Acolyte episode 6 tonight, so we're going to get into that in depth and just catch up with what we've been doing so far in the summer. It's been a couple weeks, so it's good to check in with what is going on with you guys out there. But yes, that's basically how we're going to go around this show. A little bit wider of a net of conversation today, because it is a bit of a slower time for Star Wars right now. If I'm not gonna lie, there's not a whole lot of news coming out. We got Comic-Con coming up in literally about 2 weeks. I'll be down there, so we'll see what's gonna happen there with Lucasfilm. We still don't know any panels, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, we're gonna just jump into it. Milton, how's it going, man?
Good, man. Just glad to be back on the podcast. I've been busy the last couple weekends, family stuff, traveling, work, life. But I'm glad to be back. Looking forward to talk about this episode. I can truly say this show isn't as bad as people are trying to say it is.
Agreed.
That's my little tease.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, we're bringing in the heat tonight, everybody. How's it going, Ben?
Good. I'm glad it's a slower week, because I actually have a book review for you guys in this episode. So
all right,
I can dive into that here in a bit. But yeah, my summer's been going good and everything. It's just been getting through the heat of it, working out a lot lately, back to dieting. It's been fun. I've knocked off like 7 pounds in the last couple of weeks, so it's nice, like just really getting back into a good swing and actually sticking to things and being consistent. Because I'm at a point where I'm just like, okay, it's time to stop messing around. I got to just get serious about my goals here. So I just did a lot of self-reflection and said, okay, I got to stop messing around. So back on track with that. So it's been exciting, good doing that. And then, like I mentioned, I actually just before this podcast, I just finished up listening to the Darth Plagueis audio novel.
Dude, you just started that like a couple days ago, didn't you?
I started that on Thursday. Yeah, I started that on Thursday. I listened to probably like between my workout and then other odds and end things, like when I went on a walk. Because I walk probably like an hour a day, and then coming into today, I had like 3.5 hours, 4 hours left of it, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to listen to any music during my workout. I'm just going to listen to this book. And then when I did my walk, I listened to it, and then I had like 2 hours left. So when I was doing laundry and picking up, I just grinded it out and finished it up for the podcast.
Yeah, so it's been over a decade since I've read that book, so you're gonna have to fill me in. What was your thoughts? What was your review and all that good stuff?
Well, for starters, guys, I would say its reputation is well deserved. It's, in my opinion, like I don't say this lightly, but it is absolutely perfect. Like 100% perfect story, from every aspect. So for starters, the book, to give you guys an idea of how the book's structured, because see, I hadn't read the book either in probably 10 years, or if not longer, 10, 15 years. And I forgot the book was structured in this way. So the book is structured in a way where you're going through like the timeline of basically Plagueis's life. So the first part of the book, you start out with Plagueis and Darth Tenebrous. Then you transition to Plagueis and Darth Venomous. Then you transition to Plagueis recruiting a 17-year-old Palpatine. Then it does like a 10-year time jump for another section where it's Palpatine and Plagueis, like Palpatine when he's like, a 30-year-old Sith Lord. And then you get like another jump where Palpatine's like, basically a like an ally Sith Lord to Plagueis, where he's like still under him, but he's independent at this point. And, Palpatine would be probably late 40s ish range. And you actually, you even get, so like when it's at that part of the book, you get to where Palpatine, acquires a baby Zabrak, aka Darth Maul, and you get him, and then you even get the build up to, it's probably like 5 years before the Phantom Menace. You're getting Maul training and learning and stuff, and then you're obviously still dealing with Plagueis. Then you get the lead up clear like 6 months to a year before Phantom Menace. and then you get into the Phantom Menace actually,
Wow.
which is awesome because Plagueis is alive during the Phantom Menace. And the
What?
best part is, like, I've sent Milton a couple scenes we've seen on Instagram here and there where people have identified it. So Plagueis actually, he's in the background. So
What?
in this book, in the book, you know the scene where Qui-Gon and Anakin and them are on the platform on Coruscant
Yep.
with everybody. Plagueis is just off to the side watching this whole thing unfold when they first arrive on Coruscant, and he's watching the Jedi, of course, and then he heard about this gifted kid, etc., Anakin, blah blah blah, and basically also another crazy thing that's going on in the background of all of this too is they're weaving in the Count Dooku turning stuff as well on top of all of this. And then so you have Plagueis in the background of Phantom Menace, like I said, in that scene, and then in another scene too, you even have him in the background. It's so cool. They add in, as he's getting like older in the book, he's getting like potential like visions of the future and things. And when he sees Qui-Gon and Anakin standing on the platform, when Qui-Gon's saying, "I can't train you, Anakin, but watch me," blah blah blah, that whole thing, Plagueis gets like a Force vision, and he sees a black armor-clad cyborg on a table, and he doesn't know what it is, and then he like makes the connection like, oh man, like something is actually going to be happening with the galaxy at this point. And the crazy thing is, so like in that movie, before Palpatine like gets elected Chancellor, you even have a sequence where Plagueis is listening in. So when Darth Maul's talking with Palpatine on Coruscant, and he's saying like, "At last we will have our revenge," blah blah blah, that whole sequence, Plagueis and his droid are like around the corner in the building listening in on the conversation because he wanted to like see this Zabrak apprentice in person.
Oh my goodness.
So you have these sorts of things in the background of Phantom Menace, and actually before basically right before Darth Maul's death in the Phantom Menace, that's when Plagueis gets killed by Palpatine actually. So you have this all playing out in the background of the Phantom Menace in the final like 3 hours of the book. But leading up to it, there are so many great things and connections. Like, you have Plagueis going to Camino. You have so many different things. Of course, like the Tenebrous stuff at the beginning. You have it's just so much like layer and layer and layer and layer of character development. And even like when Plagueis is doing like his different experiments, it's so great for pure lore perspective because like, he's collected, Plagueis is trying to cheat death and like, that whole thing. And so he's studying all these, highly like midichlorian count creatures. And like, we have like iconic legends creatures in there, like the Islamari, like those type of creatures and stuff that he's studying. So it's really cool seeing how the book is laid out. Cause like I said, the book is laid out like it's, it's Plagueis' entire life from apprenticeship to the time he gets killed. And like I said, you even, of course you get to see Palpatine go from age 17 clear until, a little bit after the end of the Phantom Menace. And it's great because Palpatine and Dooku are kind of having this conversation even at the end of the book and like the final 20 minutes of the book. And, Dooku basically at this point has, left the Jedi because he's basically doing it as like the same reasons as in canon. It's kind of like, he's not feeling the way the Jedi are doing things, etc. So like, he's going down a different path, etc. And he's sitting there across from Palpatine, and Dooku like is always such like a smart character, and he basically is sitting here saying to Palpatine like, I would consider dabbling in the dark side if I'd meet this supposed Sith master. Okay. And like, he's like giving him like a weird look. And Palpatine is even thinking to himself, like, there's no way he could be like identifying it's me, And like and Palpatine was like, oh, I'm sure you'll get contacted maybe eventually. or your paths will cross and blah blah blah. So like they even weave in like the little Dooku storylines. You have all these like things. Oh, you even have Padme. You have Padme from the like when she's like 7 or 8. You have her involved in there, and then it jumps ahead, like I said, a few years before Phantom Menace, and Palpatine is part of the push to get Padme elected into office for his entire big grand plan of things and stuff. So like you have like the little storylines like that. You have of course all this really cool ancient Sith stuff, and then it's like I said, it's just a fantastic book. It is literally perfect. There's no complaints I have about it. Like to me, it's like an 11 out of 10 book. It's just perfect. And the thing about it is that's interesting that'll gets to our conversation about the Acolyte tonight is we know Leslie Headland has looked at like some Legends materials and things, and there's so many takeaways coming out of this book where like if she looked at this book to any stretch of the imagination, like I could see where there could be some implications or connections into it. For example, for starters, for anyone when it comes to this show, like, we're talking about like you have Qimir, you have Osha potentially on the dark side, and then if they have a master, if anyone brings up like the Rule of Two thing, like even in this Plagueis novel, Plagueis basically says Darth Bane and the former Sith before me were wrong. Like they spread our numbers too thin, and that's why the Sith that's why the Sith had to go in hiding. So he was telling Palpatine, no, yeah, you should find an apprentice. You should get our numbers up, and like I'm encouraging you to do that sort of thing. And like that would like Plagueis basically said, hey, that's the old way of thinking. We shouldn't be following that. And the thing is too, that's so interesting that could apply to like this Acolyte show is a key thing that kept getting brought up was there were Palpatine, like there are many dark side pretenders running around in the galaxy right now, and blah blah blah. And he even mentions about him and Tenebris having ran into pretend Sith characters that weren't Sith. And like he literally says Sith pretenders in this book. So like you have that kind of like precedent already set potentially. Like I said, if Headland takes any inspiration from that regard, and then even you have so like for example, the big one, I'm sure Milton saw us talking about this in the group chat. So the opening of the book is Tenebris and Plagueis on the planet of Baldemnik. And the thing is, Baldemnik, guys, like I'm not kidding you, like the way they describe it in this book, and then the way that it's described on Wikipedia, and then the way you watch it in the Acolyte episode 6, like the island that Osha and Qimir are on, like it's like a 99.9% chance that is Baldemnik, because you literally have even at the end of the episode, you have a cortosis ore vein like in the background or whatever. I've seen people point out.
That's so like, I was looking at that closely.
Yep. So you have all of these exact same features, and on top of it, Leslie herself confirmed it's not Octu. So it's like, oh man, we have all the Sith stuff. It's building. It fits the description. Like for me, it's like I said, it's probably like a 99% chance they're going in this direction, because like also at the end of the day, like to me with with the Acolyte, if it's not in this first season, it's got to be in the second season eventually, because the thing is, this show, if we are truly building up the Sith, like Leslie herself has said, like this is about like the rise of the Sith and stuff. So if it is, like this show's like 80 to 90 years before Phantom Menace, like you're gonna be running into Plagueis eventually, you would think. So I think them sprinkling this planet in here is just a hint of it, because also, why would it be named Unknown Planet? Because the thing is, like, if you think about it this way, if they go and label it Baldemnik, instantly everyone would know, oh my gosh, Plagueis or Tenebris or whatever, and like, that could potentially spoil the surprise. So like, I think that's where we're heading in that direction, and it's just cool seeing like this kind of combination of of characters, or of things getting pulled from Legends and applied to this to this show. And also, one more quick thing too, before we go back to the Acolyte, I do want to point out a really cool thing they added into this book that I liked that I completely forgot about. So when Maul first goes on his first, whatever solo prove it mission for Palpatine, he goes and he has to take out a bunch of people, and when he comes back, he has his hand is injured, but he's like, oh yeah, I took everyone out. And Palpatine, a big thing, I was talking to you about it a little bit in the group chat, Chris, Palpatine scolds him so much because he's like, how'd you get hurt? And he's like, well, I took this guy out, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, how did he injure you? But the people that were force sensitive there didn't. And Darth Maul basically admits, he admitted he was a Sith to that guy, and he was being cocky and gloating, and Palpatine scolded him on hey, we're not supposed to reveal ourselves to anybody until the time has come. What are you doing here? And and he warns Darth Maul. It's great because it's foreshadowing. It's nice foreshadowing for the Phantom Menace, because he warns Darth Maul when you're battling a true Jedi, you can't be gloating and let your guard down, because that's how you're gonna get taken out, basically. And that's basically what happens eventually in Phantom Menace. Darth Maul's kind of cocky at the end when he's taunting Obi-Wan, and then he gets cut in half. So it was cool foreshadowing, and I like that they added in the whole thing of hey, we're not supposed to be exposing ourselves as the Sith just yet. So it makes me wonder if certain aspects like that could come into play in this show, where if you would get a master coming in, whether it be Plagueis or Tenebris, or even just if it's a different bad Sith we haven't heard of, which who knows. I could see that being a thing, Qimir getting in trouble for that, him going and revealing himself as a Sith to all these Jedi. So I don't know. It's definitely some different and interesting aspects that I could see getting drawn from this Plagueis novel, especially because, like I said, we've gotten Cortosis, we've gotten some other Legends hints, and of course, the Bald Demnic thing, I think that's I'll lock it in for me. I feel like that's, like I said, it's probably 99% chance the planet we're on. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Plagueis novel and the potential implications for the Acolyte moving forward into these final 2 episodes.
Wow, thank you for that very in-depth deep dive. I wanted to know a little, and I got a lot, that's for sure. So when it comes to Darth Plagueis, I am very, very shocked that somebody was able to take the ball and run with it that hard. It's almost essential reading when you look at the different storylines that are so closely linked to different things. Milton, to my knowledge, George Lucas had something to do with the book, I heard at one point. Do you know about that?
Yeah, from my understanding, he gave his approval. I think pretty much James Luceno worked closely with him to develop that particular story. That's why it was so beloved. I know it was a New York Times bestseller for a while. I remember seeing the cover for the first time. It was, I think it's Palpatine on a knee, but then in the back cover, it's Darth Maul with his saber in an action pose. But it's well written. Ben went in depth with a lot of information about it, and again, it's if you lined it up with the Phantom Menace, you're watching an extended part of the movie.
Oh man!
Especially the last quarter of the book, because that's when you are seeing the current politics of the Phantom Menace bleed into that particular book, and how Plagueis is a background character. And obviously, listening to it via audiobook, the death scene. There's 2 particular best scenes in that book, in my opinion. There's the final scene when Plagueis gets killed, spoilers.
Yep.
And then whenever Palpatine, and I don't know if you remember this, Ben, when Palpatine first kills his family.
Oh yeah, that scene. Okay, that scene is incredible.
That scene's being fought, because honestly, Chris, how that plays out explains a lot about Palpatine. And so he did not have a great relationship with his father.
Yep.
His father hated him from the moment he was born. He says it. He's like, "You fought me from day one, the moment you were born.
Yep.
You're not of my blood, but I had you tested to see if you were. But you are my blood. But there's something about you that he was flat out saying to his kid, "I'm not. I don't love you. I'm not proud of
Yep.
you. I want nothing to do with you."
Sheesh.
And then his father, I forget his name, but he makes a comment. It's Klazinga. He makes
Yep.
a comment. He says, "Palpatine." He's like, "It looks like you want to murder me." And then he's like, "If you like going to do it, you better do it now." And all of a
Yep.
sudden, the music swells up, and Palpatine just bleeds into the Force, and he just loses control and just. I mean, the scene's graphic. I mean, he smashes his dad. His mom comes in. What's going on? Kills her. Like,
Yep.
it's insane.
The guards, everybody, like it's a wild scene. Like that was like such a graphic scene listening to it too, like just the way they described it and everything. I was like, oh dang, this is wild. Like, yeah, I mean, you have that scene. I mean, heck, Milton, even early on in the book, like after the Tenebrous and Plagueis sections, you have when Plagueis first gets his ship, or he gets his first ship, he's like on a like a trader vessel. And literally on Wikipedia, there's a section called like the slaughter on the Wabagaden or Wabgaden or whatever. Anyways, it's the name of the ship. And like Plagueis just like wipes out this crew of people and everything. And like, the cool thing is like kind of connecting, hey, to Clone Wars, like the captain of it, she's like a Togruta character. So I was just thinking of like, like an Ahsoka type. Yeah, I mean, like you get like those types of things. Oh, and another really, really cool one, Chris, that you like for connections to lore and everything. So with Darth Maul progressing, really well in his training, etc. Plagueis is like really impressed when he's talking with Palpatine about it. So he actually tells Palpatine like, "Hey, you can take my ship and give it to Maul as a gift for him like becoming a successful like Sith assassin and all this stuff." So Darth Maul's ship we see in Phantom Menace is Darth Plagueis' ship. Like keep that, like think about that, like the connections there. And then even another cool little connection too, like early on in the book, like years before the Phantom Menace and before even Palpatine, in the early part of the book, you have Plagueis like do some investments. It's just like passed over in a conversation, but he does some investments on Tatooine with Gardola the Hutt for a Boonta Eve pod racing course. So like, Plagueis basically funded the pod racing course we see in Phantom Menace. So it's like it's cool seeing these little connections of Plagueis like connecting to Phantom Menace. And it's like, after listening to that, like this is where I get into like, like the canon versus legends thing. Like this is me. I'm just like, yep, this book just gets slotted right in as headcanon because it basically fits. And it's amazing regardless of canon, legends, on screen, off screen, whatever. Like the book, it's just so impressive. Like to me, I was like so impressed how much like they layered and layered and layered. And heck, even you have the buildup of right before the Trade Federation even sends the ships to surround Naboo. Like you have that whole sequence of Palpatine talking to Gunray and the Nemodians and stuff. So like you have so many like, it's almost like, especially as you get close to the Phantom Menace part of it, it's if you'd imagine, Chris, it's kind of like a certain point of view for the Phantom Menace, but just a few months before the Phantom Menace and into the Phantom Menace. Okay. So like, you have so much of that, and it's from Palpatine's perspective, and it's like it's done so well. But yeah, like there's just so many great aspects. It was so nice and refreshing, like going back and listening to this after, like I said, probably 10 or 15 years of not have, I hadn't read it since then, and it's well worth catching up on again, that's for sure.
Oh man, well, that's awesome. I mean, I wasn't expecting to get a deep dive of Darth Plagueis today, but here we are. So, and like you said, it will connect to Acolyte later on. We'll make that more clearly evident of how these two are connected. But Milton, man, it's been a few weeks. How has Star Wars interacted in your life, or has it kind of taken a back seat in the last couple of weeks?
I mean, it's always in like in the forefront, and in the sense of like my daily life of watching, podcasts throughout the week or episodes of like lore of Star Wars. I mean, I guess most directly, you know, as you guys know, yesterday I said I got a PlayStation 5 finally. So I'm going to I have Fallen Order on there to play.
Yep.
So I'll officially play that eventually in the next week or so, starting that process slowly. So I think that will be the most direct Star Wars I will continuously get involved in, and I'll probably play because I have Star Wars Commando, I think, on PlayStation 4 that I transferred over.
Yep.
And I have Jedi Knight 1 and 2, like the Outcast or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they're great games.
So I'll probably eventually play those on the 5 now.
Heck yeah.
Nice.
Well, welcome to the club. It's the water's warm over here in next gen or current gen, we should say now. But
yeah.
I mean, honestly, there was not one game that could push me over until obviously college football comes out. So that's the game that does it for your boy to get me over into it. But obviously, and I've said it from day one. Once I get a 5, I'll officially play the Fallen Order games. I'll get into them and we'll see how they play out. Which you guys said they're not bad at all, so I know I will enjoy them.
Yeah, they're a little bit, a little bit difficult at first for a lot of people just because they're more hardcore. I mean, you can make difficulty easier, but it's a lot of that pairing and then attacking, dodging, like waiting at the first moment.
Right, but you know what though? If you're a gamer like that, you know how to get through. You can I mean, look, I played. Was it Force Unleashed 1 and 2?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Battlefront game. So like, it's kind of like those feels in a lot of ways, from what I'm understanding. Obviously, more cleaner, more updated. But if you know how to like use your buttons and how to navigate the game, you're fine. Like you'll have to just learn as you go.
Oh yeah, no, that game, I think you're gonna really like it, Milton. Like the combat, the story. Cal's character is really cool, especially you remember from back in the day, the guy that plays him is the guy from who played Joker in Gotham. Like that, that whole game though, it's a good time. And like you said, Chris, like some of the controls, like combat, getting used to some of that stuff. You'll take time, but it's just you do that with every game really. Like for me, with those games, it was more just sometimes just like I would like get lost like navigating. I'd be like, okay, where am I supposed to go next or something? But I made it through eventually. But no, those games, once you really get into the good flow of it, they're a blast, just like the Force Unleashed games and all the other really good Star Wars games, really.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about your progress from time to time on the podcast. We'll get an update from you to see where you are in the game. I've played the game like 3 times over, so I know just about every little part of that game's story and combat, boss wise. So it'll be fun. And so as far as my week in Star Wars, I had a pretty big week in Star Wars. Me and my girlfriend, we went to the new set release for the Star Wars card game, Star Wars Unlimited. So it was her first time like out in the public there, besides just fighting me at home. We went out to an event where it was like, okay, you get 6 booster packs, you open them up, and you make a 30-card deck based on the leaders and the cards you get and all that. So it was a really fun night. She learned a lot, because it's not just me playing against her. There's a bunch of other people playing against her, and they were helping her out. So it was cool. The community here in Yardville, the War Gaming Guild is where we played. All those guys over there, super friendly, open. The people, Kyle and Kara, that throw the events, really, really good people. So it's nice to be in a positive environment. We get sucked into these black holes on Twitter and everything else where it's like, oh my gosh, the community sucks. And you go to like a local game night, or you go to like a convention, and you suddenly just forget about all the crappy things online, and it's like, yeah, this is cool. So she enjoyed it. We got a lot of cool cards. So yeah, that's gonna be fun to do now. She's basically putting her binder together as we speak with the cards, so I'm teaching her the ways, which is pretty cool. She's into it. So
yeah, I saw you you got Dr. Aphra, correct?
Yes, I did.
I thought I saw that on social media.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because they're putting in like some real deep cuts. Like most people that play the game are going to be like, Doctor Who? And I'm like, excuse me, that is a comic book character that has not even been on screen yet. Thank you very much. So it's been fun, really cool characters, and I'm going to keep sharing different images of cool cards I get. So that's why you want to follow me on Twitter for cool Star Wars art and cards is Starrapter. But speaking of which, getting some housekeeping, we go live every Sunday. This summer we're a little bit back and forth on the times just because we all have lives, right? So we're all doing things. I'll be in Comic-Con in 2 weeks, so we're going to skip a show then, but we'll be back next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So just again, follow me on Twitter, follow the show by subscribing here, and you'll get an update on like when we're actually going live that week. But if you can't make it live, it's no big deal because we can be downloaded on any podcast streaming network of your choice, Spotify, Apple. Please give us a rate and review. It's very much appreciated to help spread the news, spread the word about Outer Rim Transmission as a podcast. Just look us up there. I want to send a shout out to the Lowdown Show in the chat right now. We're going to get to your comments as we get into the proper part of our show. But yes, you can join the show live with him and interact with us. It's always a good time. All right, so getting into it, we have a couple releases that came out this week. We have Inquisitors #1, brand new miniseries from Marvel. Talks about Grand Inquisitor, Darth Vader, like, you know, in that time period when they're hunting down Jedi. Really cool. Tenchu Run, a brand new character, brand new Jedi Knight that's starting up a new order. It gets crushed instantly, as you would expect, but it is still pretty cool nonetheless. That came out as well as the High Republic issue #9. I have the reviews for those on the channel already, and as I always point you toward the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, me and Matthew Neugebauer over there every Wednesday night breaking down that week's comics at 9 p.m. on our Tractor Beam live show. Again, that's every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. We also have a book that I didn't pick up this week. I know I usually pick up most Star Wars books, but this one is not something that's really in my wheelhouse that I really want to explore, but it is Star Wars: The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. It's basically like an autobiography from the perspective of some kind of Imperial that is like retelling the events, I guess, of like just what happened with the rise and fall of the Empire or something like that. There was another book like that that came out written by Kristen Baver a year or two ago called something about the Skywalker family or legacy or something like that. And that was a similar thing. It's like, okay, somebody's talking about, you know, Skywalkers as if they're in universe, talking about their history. So I'm going to pass on that one, but that is out if you guys want to go ahead and check that out. Also, one really cool book, one really big, large, massive book that came out this week. And it was one of those books that I ordered literally like a year ago, I think, guys. And these things take a long time to put together, but I was able to get it for quite a bargain. But yeah, here we go. I have two similar things already like this, but this one you guys are definitely going to appreciate. This is a Star Wars Legends Omnibus. This is the New Republic Volume 2. So this book is like 1,000+ pages of Legends material from the Dark Horse comic era. It has the entire run of the Thrawn trilogy in comic book form, the entire run of the Dark Empire. Awesome. Yeah, the entire run of Dark Empire's in here. You have like whatever storyline of like the Boba Fett storyline. So like running through the major titles here, there's like so many authors, but yeah, you have certain Star Wars Tales issues in here. As I mentioned, Dark Empire, Heir of the Empire is all in here. You have something called Star Wars Boba Fett, different things, different Boba Fett tales and whatnot. So yeah, this is pretty awesome. The first volume of this, which is another omnibus, has like the Rogue Squadron books. So one of these days, before I die, I will check this out because I got a long list of things to get to first. Like I said, I'm still making my way slowly through the chronological order of Legends, and I'm still on the first comic book, guys. I know I'm taking forever with it. It's not very good, and that's why it's taking me this long. I go into break room, you know, on the one job I work 2 days a week. I get a 30-minute break and a 15-minute, 15-minute break, whatever. I always have the intentions. I always bring the comic with me. And half the time I just scroll through my phone because I'm more entertained, unfortunately, by the phone than I am with the book right now. I'm going to get through it one day, but if I have to read like 2 pages a day, I'll get through that eventually in a couple months. Yeah, and if you're wondering what book it is the Star Wars, what is it, the Tales of the Jedi or something? That's the name of the epic collection, but it's the very first chronological book where they're on like Tython, and
or is it Dawn of the Jedi?
That's the one. Yeah, it's like the tie-in to that. There's a book that goes along with it, but then there's also the comics, and it's very dull. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get through it, guys. Trying to get through it. Good thing I don't have to review it. Oh man, so that is basically all the updates we have this week. The rest of the show, we're going to just dive in deep with the Acolyte. This is season 1. I'm calling it season 1. I'm putting it into the universe that we're going to get a season 2. Season 1, episode 6, Teach/Corrupt. So we're back to those double episode meaning titles, which is pretty neat. So yeah, this is an episode that is kind of like one of those setup episodes, but it also does a lot with the character development. Obviously, how are you going to follow up an amazing battle episode in episode 5? You gotta come off the high a little bit, but I still think it is just as interesting for me because in the promo of sharing this episode, I said this is like a Last Jedi centric episode of Star Wars TV. Like you totally feel the Reylo vibes of Qimir and Osha, and just the turn of those characters, of her character, and everything with the Sith talk. If he is a Sith, if he isn't, but just like the idea of the dark side in general, the principles, the philosophy of the dark side, of somebody being corrupted, but then being ushered into a new way of thinking and then accepting it for themselves. Meanwhile, you have Li Jianjie doing an amazing performance, giving an amazing performance as Master Sol, being this very burdened Jedi that is just so out of touch. And then you have crazy things happening, like Basil trying to fight off May and doing like a 360, roundhouse kick sort of thing. So there's a lot to break down in this episode. I'm going to throw it over to Milton because it's been a couple of weeks since I've talked to you about the episode. So first of all, how are you liking the series in general? Then you can just dive in for this episode. First thoughts.
Yeah, and I'll get to how I like the series as I get to the second part of my answer. But I say last week's episode. I just want to touch on that a little bit. Last week's episode I thought was pretty well done. Excuse me, I would say the last 3 episodes were pretty solid. So you had the lead up to when they met the Acolyte, obviously the battle last week. So I guess you have episode 4, 5, and 6.
Yep.
Yeah. So 4, 5, and 6 has been pretty solid episodes. I think I look at it right now as a 3-part arc in a lot of ways because, especially for, how you say his name? Is it Qimir? Is that the character?
Qimir.
Yeah, Qimir. Like for me, I see that first episode, which would have been, I guess, 4. You're seeing like just like that goofy character that you're like, well, he's a drunk, whatever. Then in that episode 5, where you're seeing him like wreck shop and truly show who he is, and in today's, or I guess the episode from this past week, you're seeing his philosophy and where he came from. So I liked last week's episode. It's pretty well for the most part. Love the battle scene. Love the duels. Love the use of the helmet. This past episode, because I actually just finished it this afternoon, nice. I really enjoyed it. I felt that it was a well-written episode. And again, I'm seeing people online try to crush every episode. And I don't know if that's a weird hidden agenda. And I'll be honest with you, this show isn't the most consistent, because the pacing is off to me. I will say the pacing in the show can do some work. I can say at times there just drags on. However, I felt this episode was necessary, not to drag, but to at least give us some explanation about who this guy is, what his purpose is, what his motivation. Because now we need to understand his motivation. Because these next 2 episodes are going to be critical to see how he now wants to utilize Osha to conquer his endgame. because clearly he said I made a mistake with May, so we all know he's going to try to use Osha to get what he wants moving forward. I really enjoyed what I was watching today. I felt that you're right about The Last Jedi feel. However, this was done better, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm just being honest with you. Like, I didn't feel bored with it. I didn't feel like, oh my god, this is unnecessary. And I think why I didn't feel that way is because, this acolyte, he's threatening. He's badass. Like there's a point behind him. He isn't just killing people because he wasn't being a coward in any way. And I feel like this feels perfect for his character. Obviously with the whole Luke thing in Last Jedi, that just felt off. It didn't feel right, and it was just goofy writing, in my opinion. I felt this wasn't goofy. I felt this was fairly consistent for what we've gotten with the character as we've slowly been revealing who he truly is.
Oh yeah, I could really agree with a lot of those things. And the overall series, yeah, I'm right. Like, I agree with you. Like, those first 4 episodes really just didn't feel exactly like I was hoping the show would go. But once we get to episode 4, I think every one of these episodes so far has been a great episode in my eyes. Yeah, kind of going off my initial thoughts, like, this planet, I like the set designs. The set designs continue to impress. This is shot over in England, I think. Same kind of places where Andor and The Force Awakens and all was filmed, and I think it really shows that not everything needs to be done on the volume, and it's great to kind of go back to the creature designs looking great. You got these cool duck-like creatures that are like anteaters / ducks. It's like it's great getting new Star Wars designs. Just my main takeaway, and I'll throw it over to Ben. My main takeaway is how much I like the actor of Manny Jacinto. And first of all, this guy is chiseled beyond belief, man. This guy's got an awesome body type. Like, this guy's, it's cool to see somebody lean kind of like more like me and just being able to go through and just, I was actually shocked because I'm like, are they actually going to show us more than they usually do with Star Wars? At one point I was like, what's happening here? You got this naked guy walking through the water. What is going to happen?
Well, Chris, just to throw in there for your point real quick when you're on Manny, I don't know if you saw the promotional vid, but the designer of the costume and stuff said when they were designing his character, they were thinking a mixture, and Milton, you might be interested in this. They were thinking of a mixture between Vader and Darth Maul since he was slimmer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
that was an interesting thing.
But then just the presence of Manny. Every time he's on screen talking, I am glued to the screen. I am, waiting his every word, because this guy, like Milton said, like, he deserves to get the kind of attention he's getting, because he's actually a threat. He gives us what we want to know as far as like why he's doing this. He's not just a mustache twirling villain. He's one of those people that's like, no, the Jedi are after me kind of thing. I want to do my own thing. I'm not just doing this because I'm just killing people for no reason. They're kind of like getting in my way or whatever, and it's interesting. But just the idea that the conversations he's having with Osha, and just he's kind of manipulating her, but is he? Because he's just telling her the truth. And I can see, I think me and Ben, Ben and I have talked about this before, where it's like you can see the lineage of where Palpatine might have gotten influence from what this guy does. Like, his behavior and stuff seems kind of like Palpatine, like Anakin, like him, like basically kind of like shepherding Anakin in to like his regime slowly over years and years. Like, I could see that happening with Osha and this character here. So yeah, he is my MVP by far for the series so far. But I'll throw it over to you, Ben, for your first thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to throw out there as well. So last week's episode, like, in my opinion, if this show would have gone off the vibes from like halfway through the 4th episode further, everybody would be probably universally loving this show, I would say. Just because I think this is what we were expecting from, this Sith show. The way they talked about it, I think what people were expecting is what we've gotten from like the end of the 4th episode on. And I think that's why most people are really enjoying these last couple episodes. And as you guys said, the lightsaber fights, everything were really good in the last one. To me, that's like the best live action lightsaber fight, I would say, under Disney so far. And then I still think the best one though overall is the Ahsoka Maul. But overall though, for me, I really think this most recent episode, like you guys said, like, you know, I have some issues with it. I think there are some weird writing decisions, like, you know, throughout the last couple weeks. But for me, I think the episodes are going in a direction I would, you know, I like the show going, you know, like you said, like you were explaining, Chris, like Chimir's character, just, you know, getting to see him lay out the Sith stuff, like the whole power of two, rule of two type stuff, you know, talking about the Jedi and like, you know, how they view things differently and all that. And like, you know, that's another interesting thing too. Like, so even just like listening to that Plagueis book, like hearing Palpatine talk to Maul about like, or hearing Plagueis talk to Palpatine, I mean, about how like, hey, the Jedi are just interpreting the Force differently than the Sith are. Like, there's no like good or bad. It's like their interpretation is just different, and they just basically hate us. So like, it's cool just getting to see like this Sith side of things with Qimir, and then of course, like I said, with all the legends, Easter eggs, and callbacks, and potential things that are in this show that like, you know, could lead to other implications down the road here. And then, you know, like you mentioned, his character definitely is, I would say, you know, for a long time for me, it was Sol's character being the best actor. But I think Manny Jacinto's proved that he's the best actor on the show, just purely from like seeing his range of acting going from, you know, the little sloppy bartender guy to totally believable Sith Lord. Because, you know, you see actors like, you know, you see it from different movies, for example. Like, you'll see an actor play a goofball character in one movie, then he tries to be serious in another movie, and you're like, man, I don't buy it. And, like, this guy is going across the range in a single series. So it's impressive seeing him be able to do that. And then, yeah, I'm really, really interested to see where the show goes with him. And, like, you know, like we had mentioned, his status, like, he talks about, like, identifying as a Sith and stuff. You know, I know that's like been like a contentious thing, people like debating it left and right in the fandom. But like, you have like Manny and Leslie, like they got interviewed by EW, and like, you know, they like, he literally said, I'm a Sith, or I'm a Sith Lord. So like, you know, it's interesting hearing their perspectives. And, you know, I'm just interested for the horizon of where it's going to go though with like his character specifically. Cause like now, you know, I'm at a point with the show where it's like, okay, the good guy stuff is fine and everything, but let's just focus a lot on Manny and Osha's characters, because we also had Leslie point out in that same interview, there are going to be at least 2 Sith by the end of the show, which means, to me, like, there's probably going to be more than 2, because her saying at least is not definitively only 2. It's like at least 2. So it's like, where are we heading with that? So, like, there's so many implications with the dark side, like, the bad guy side of the show. I'm way more invested in what Qimir and Osha are doing at the moment than, say, Sol. Like, obviously, we're going to see, like, what happens next week, I'm sure, with Sol and May and stuff. But the Qimir stuff is just so interesting for so many reasons we haven't even got into yet, like with the scars and everything. But, you know, we'll break the episode down further.
Yeah, so we'll jump off this point while it's probably the biggest point for us to talk about tonight. Let's just knock it out of the way. The one thing I forgot to mention or didn't mention yet is how vulnerable that Qimir appears to Osha, literally without clothes on his back, like has his back turned toward her, and just the idea of like, yeah, let her try to strike me down. Let me just see what she does. Going to the point where he's just holding the saber to his chest, like, just turn on the button. Just the confidence in this guy is unbelievable, man. So what'd you think about like all the scenes just from the get-go here, Milton, with these 2 characters?
I mean, it was a highlight of the episode. It's not a question. I mean, I think this probably been the best writing of the series thus far, is his interactions with Osha, explaining that, you know, his motivation, one, trying to get her to understand, like, hey, the Jedi really aren't the shit. You know, they're the ones that really throw people away, but they make you think you walked away. You know, like, I mean, we've seen so many Jedi leave the Order. I mean, what is it, the Lost 20 or something like that. They call them. I mean, I guess Dooku and Ahsoka might be part of that crew, but look at how they left. You know, they felt they had to leave, but were they really? Did they really feel that way, or were they kind of forced out but manipulated to do so? You know, so like I think what he was trying to tell Osha was like, hey, it really wasn't your choice. Like you probably were the best thing for the Jedi, but they probably feared you because you were different. And I guarantee we're going to get that perspective eventually of why she left. I felt that was a strong indication of his background, of where he's coming from with his master. Again, I don't know who trained him up, whether it's another Jedi or a Sith. Hopefully we get those answers, but something had to have happened to make him walk away or be thrown away and feel like he was thrown away. And I think he relates to Osha because she felt like she was thrown away. Even though she doesn't want to verbally say it, I think internally she probably feels it, and which is why she said, I left the order on my own, you know, fruition. So no, I felt that was a really strong part of the episode.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Like I think you know, just his whole exposition and just breakdown of like his past and talking about you know him being a former Jedi and things, and it makes you wonder as well. Like he said he was, you know, like part of the Jedi a really long time ago, but the thing is, like he used the word really long,
yeah,
and like. I mean, I don't know. You know, we don't have like a canon age yet for the guy, but I mean, Manny Jacinto's only like 37 years old in real life, so like maybe you could stretch him out and say he's like 50 or something in this, like a really good-looking 50-year-old. But you can't tell me this dude's like 60 in the show.
No.
So I mean, I don't know. I guess really long time ago can be interpreted differently by some people. So I guess it could make sense. It's just an interesting way he worded it.
I feel like let me interject real quick. I feel like there was some Sith sorcery going on when you mentioned that. Like that was interesting. Like, you know, we know that Sith can prolong their lives. I mean, that's what Plagueis was doing. You can escape death, right? So what's that to say that this guy is what Plagueis gets that from or something? So that's where my mind automatically went to that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening. You know, I've seen some folks say like maybe we get you know, like if we would get like a Plagueis or a Tenebris at the end of this, like maybe this guy's gonna be you know, maybe like one of their two apprentices and stuff, like because you know they've had, you know, Tenebris and Plagueis have had multiple apprentices, so it's not like it would be unheard of, and like some of them are unnamed, so it's not like, you know, it's, you know, of course the book's legends and everything, so it doesn't matter, but you know, if you roughly follow that, like there's still wiggle room to fit in this character into that whole story. And like in regards to his past, an interesting thing that a lot of folks are talking about here's a real big thing. So, you know, with his scars, people like to me it's either okay. It's either super easy for one, where it's like, okay, it's Venestra because those look like whip scars, so like, you know, maybe she was just a terrible master to him or something at some point, and like, you know, she was doing that. Or maybe it was just having to do with like maybe his Sith master threw him away potentially, because the thing is, to me it's like it's one of two things. It's either they're like putting us right there on a silver platter like, yo, it's Venestra, because like either the scene before his scars or the scene after, like we see her with the whip in the woods. So it's like, it's either they're putting it on the plate right there as like they're showing us it, or it's just like a red herring to make us think it's Venestra when it's really whoever his like Sith master is. Like it's got to be like one of those two. It's just I don't really know where they would go with it, because the thing is, to me, the Venestra thing's complicated because like, how are you going to get her? Like, if she is his master, you have to add in that whole emotional element and story of like, okay, are you going to have her be his main combatant in the finale, like Venestra versus him? Like because you know what I mean? And if we have like a 40-minute episode, that's a lot of stuff to do with Osha, May, like you're gonna have Osha and May drama dialogue, I'm sure. You're gonna have Sol and Osha drama dialogue, I'm sure. Then Qimir doing his thing, and then like, are you gonna squeeze in Venestra versus Qimir like emotional battle too? So like to me, it's like, is there almost too much stuff going on for it to be Venestra, and they're just trying to red herring us to thinking it's her actually?
I mean, I don't know. We could jump into the speculation with the wound on his back. I mean, that's clearly some kind of like whip type of thing, and the fact that they literally showed that scar and then showed her just using a whip, a light whip, which is awesome for High Republic fans. I mean, I was ecstatic seeing that in a trailer. That's all we got, was just her killing a bug with the thing. I don't think that's the last we'll see of it. There's no way that that's the extent of such a cool weapon. Is, oh, that's all we get is this 1 second thing the whole season. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I feel like the next episode, maybe they won't have an entire flashback, but we'll have like a little very big important part, and then start to see that stuff play out. Because I agree, it would be a little bit forced to be like, oh, by the way, and then you have this big resolution happening in the last 10 minutes of the season 1. Like, that would feel weird and rushed. I trust that the creators figured out a way to do that, but it seems like they clearly are telegraphing that those two things are linked.
Yep. Oh,
which makes which makes it the more heartbreaking, man, because as a person that has read all that stuff, like, she's a prodigy. We get introduced to her at like 15. She's the first Jedi Knight at 15 years old, and she's very righteous and very, as a kid, but like 100 years later, obviously through turmoil and war and stuff, your life changes. So to see one of our favorite characters suddenly become the bad guy, so to speak, is going to be a shock to a lot of us, but it'll be cool if they make that leap. I will say that. I'll give them props for getting us on board and saying, oh, this is not the character you thought they were all these years later. And here's another book series of things you could read after High Republic is done next year, or just about Venestra Row and bridging the gap or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be a possibility. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So walk with me on this one, Ben, because you have made a link, and you had mentioned this before, but the mining on Cortosis on this planet, and then Leslie Headland literally just confirmed this is not Octo, and that's the Last Jedi feelings I was getting. Milton was like, oh, this planet is just like I thought it was Octo, and then they say the unknown planet, which is pretty funny. It's like, you didn't have to call it anything yet. You could have just announced it later, but they just simply call it the unknown planet title card. So I thought that was interesting. I do want to give credit to Lowdown in our chat, saying the pool that he was in when she finds him there bathing, whatever, it's supposedly from it's like a magic fountain type of youth. Mm-hmm. In an EU book? He thinks it's from the Plagueis book?
Yeah, I mean, I know they reference certain, in that book, they reference, certain different, alchemies and different, things of, the way the Sith try to, extend their lives and whatnot. The interesting thing about that whole fountain thing, it could just be complete, not paying attention to costumes and stuff. But when he goes into the costume, when he takes his clothes off, he's wearing his dark outfit. And when he comes out of the bath, he's wearing a lighter outfit. It's like, what's up with that? I guess he could just be wearing two different outfits, but it was just weird they changed the clothing color. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to do with this whole island thing. I really do. Just because, like I said, we have the Legends connections. It's probably, like I said, I would be more surprised than not if it's not Bald Demnick, just because of all the empirical evidence, all the outside evidence, and I mean, it'd be different if Leslie Headland wasn't saying she was getting influences from so many different Legends things. But the fact that she's talking about that every single week, and then in one of the interviews, I think it was one of the video interviews she did, she said there were certain Legends aspects she couldn't talk about until after the show's over.
Oh.
So it's I feel like this planet has got to be one of them. And it's just interesting because, the whole Cortosis thing, just because it's like I said, that's for the first quarter of the Plagueis book, it's dealing with this Bald Demnick planet.
Oh.
And, you're dealing with Tenebris and Plagueis there, and, all these sorts of things. and it's just like, are we gonna have a, kind of like a situation where we're getting like the, a live action adaptation of this planet for one, and then for two, if if we would get a big bad at the end, is it going to be a Tenebris? Is it going to be a Plagueis? Because like, to me, I feel like we're heading in that direction. I'm not even basing that on my own speculation. Leslie's words, like before the show came out back 6-7 months ago or whatever, when she was talking about the show, she said there's a master, an apprentice, and an acolyte. Like she clarified those three things. So unless you like kind of like twist it around and say like, well, Qimir's the master, May was the apprentice, and then Osha's the acolyte. Like, unless you like twist it around really weird, that means we still haven't seen the master yet, because like, in last week's episode, Qimir, literally said he was looking for an acolyte. So that means he's the apprentice. So it's just like, who's the master coming in at the end of this? Is it going to be a Tenebris? Is it going to be a Plagueis? Is it going to be a, like you said, Venestra? Is Venestra going to go bad and they turned her into the pseudo Tenebris master, basically? Because the thing is, in the Plagueis book, Tenebris's master is a Twi'lek, which of course Venestra isn't a Twi'lek, but like, her species looks similar. Like, so
yep, she's a Miriam.
So maybe they do something like that and kind of like adapt that to a degree. But I do feel like we're gonna get some sort of big master character reveal at the end here, just because of like what Leslie said, and then of course, like I said, with the implications from this planet, and like, I don't think this is the last time we see Cortosis again, though. The thing that could jeopardize this is what happened even in the Plagueis book, is you see Cortosis is like really explosive, like when it's getting mined. So like maybe we get a thing where like, some stuff goes down in the finale and like the island gets blown up or something for like maybe they can't access the Cortosis mines very well after that or something, because like, there's so many implications coming out of this. And like, that's one of the best parts I think about this show. I'm sure you guys can kind of agree to it too. Like, one of the best parts is like, we're actually finally getting fan speculation back again in Star Wars shows. And it's so nice because we haven't had this sort of like fan chatter online, I feel like, in terms of speculation and theories, since Mando Season 2, probably.
Oh, yeah. It's really good to have the positivity of, Mando Season 2, there was so much stuff like, because we had those leaks and it was like, ooh, Boba Fett's going to be showing up. Ooh, this character's going to be showing up. Even before we started watching, obviously, the episodes. But this is on something that's like Force Awakens level, almost, where there's so much stuff going on. Oh, what's going to happen to the sequel trilogy? And so it's good to see, because that's part of what keeps the Star Wars fandom alive, is talking with your buddies about, did you watch the episode? How do you think it's going to go next week? And, here's this theory I have. Everybody has a theory, and I love to see it. It's so great. One thing I want to really touch on is the Cortosis, and the fact that they just simply mention it in dialogue. Like, this is something that I remember back in a video game in like 2003 or 4 we just talked about it not too long ago, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. That was where you had, I think it was Dark Troopers that were coded in it, or some kind of other adversary had Cortosis. But I loved the lore behind this thing about how it's a sensory deprivation chamber, basically, for these guys. And it'll enhance their force abilities, because then they cut off all these other thoughts and it's just them in the darkness or whatever. And then where you get to see the personification of the darkness itself at the end of the episode when Osha puts this thing on, and to see the perspective of like, you can't really even see out of this thing. It's basically like Luke Skywalker from A New Hope, using the blast shield down and deflecting the blast. So that is so cool when you realize like this guy was able to take down all these Jedi, not even really seeing, but basically being blind, but not to the Force, like being very powerful in the Force. That's how he was able to amplify his Force abilities by wearing this freaking thing. So that was just a really cool nerd moment overall for me. It was like, the in depth and the detail and just the cool addition to lore about having this guy wearing his helmet because it's actually going to amplify his powers.
Yeah. I love that they pulled that from Legends. I guess it was in canon actually already, technically. But it is cool getting to see like stuff like that played out on screen, just because like you know what I mean, like for like Legends people like me and Milton, it's cool getting to see like things like Cortosis, things potentially like if this is Baldemnik, getting these iconic locations pulled from Legends. And hey, shout out Tartakovsky Clone Wars, we did have one episode of that show on Baldemnik actually. So like, you know, you have these sorts of things, and I don't know, it's just like a rewarding feeling for us like hardcore fans, especially like fans who appreciate like the Legends material, like getting to see like these sorts of things in live action.
Oh yeah, this is where the series can really shine, because the series I feel like get deeper into this kind of nitty gritty kind of stuff with the lore versus like the big mainstream movies. What are your thoughts on Basil, Milton? I'm very curious.
That little creature?
Yeah.
I mean, like, honestly, it's cute. Like, it really doesn't do it for me. Like, it's, okay. I mean, it was kind of funny, like how.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think May realized like what he was doing in the sense of like, oh, I know you're not Osha, which I think obviously why Sol figured it out. Because I think he was paying attention from a distance. He just didn't. They didn't want to show that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought the character's cute. I mean, he's there for humor. He's there for the do his. I mean, you gotta have some levity in a show like this, and he brings that.
Exactly.
Well, I was gonna say, to throw in there, that's another thing. Speaking of Legends, I saw from one of those interviews, they Leslie pulled that from. It was a book from the 80s or early 90s, I believe, that species. So it was cool just seeing like a random tracking species like that just pulled and thrown in there. So I do appreciate that, actually. And yeah, you know, you always have creatures in Star Wars, so it's like, you know, you're gonna have your like buddy creature or droid in pretty much every Star Wars project for the most part.
And I enjoyed how Sol directly kind of made a meta kind of comment with May and the droid, like, why do you care so much about your droids? You know, because all these Star Wars characters, they always do. They treat them like pets. So it's kind of a cool thing. But then that's also how he confirmed that it definitely wasn't May or Osha, because obviously she didn't have this droid when she was training with him. So I don't think she did, or at least he knows this information. So, you know, it's like, okay, asking these serious, but then she kind of asked something stupid in my eyes. Like, she's like, "Did you ever tell me this?" It's like, wouldn't you remember him telling you about what happened? Like, that's pretty traumatic. Like, if you ever got those details, like, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't forget them. So why would you ask him point blank, "Did you ever tell me what happened that night?" That's a dead giveaway. Yep. Like, what do you mean? That was the most traumatic part of your life. Of course I told you what happened, or whatever. Like, that was odd, but you know.
Yeah, I'm really hoping we're gonna really get a good payoff for all of this talk. Like, you know, the Sol talk, because like, you know, guys, we've been like building and building and building. You know, Sol keeps saying, "I'll tell you eventually, tell you eventually, tell you eventually," all this stuff to both the girls, and it's like, I hope we get some sort of payoff with him where it's going to be something really just wild, like we're not expecting, like, to see a Jedi do, just because, like, I don't know, like, I hope the payoff is worth the build-up, is what I'm saying, just because of, like, all this talk and stuff, which I think it should, since the episode is the 7th episode. I feel like, you know, in theory, it should be a pretty good payoff, especially leading into the finale to add to the drama of everything. And you know, like you mentioned, Chris, maybe we're gonna get kind of like a, you know, the Sol part of the episode is just gonna be the flashbacks, and maybe like present day we get Qimir and Osha still doing their thing potentially.
Yeah, it was a good way of leaving it off. Like, okay, I'm gonna tell you something, and it's like, oh, we're gonna have to wait till next week. But it's like that's what I like about the series. We're getting these answers in the last couple of weeks. We're getting answers, but we're also getting that carrot on the stick for the next week. Like, okay, we got this other mystery that's about to be solved that we've been waiting literally all season for this whole thing to be answered. But yeah, he's definitely good. Oh, here's the thing. He had mentioned something about the High Council, like, oh, I'm going to turn myself into the High Council. And immediately my mind went to Yoda. I said, this series is going to show us Yoda. I don't think anybody even had, like, a lot of people aren't thinking about Yoda as a cameo, but I really feel strongly that if he ever, put it this way, if he ever makes it back to Coruscant and they do have a High Council scene, we know Yoda is on the High Council at this point. Well, he was 100 years prior, so why wouldn't he be now? But I assume he's not going to make it back there alive, unfortunately. So
yeah, I don't think any of these people are making it back, honestly, just because, like, guys, like, we have so much, there's been so much chatter in the fandom of, like, oh my gosh, is this, like, messing up the prequels and stuff, which, like, to me, you can't, if we would make it back to, say, Coruscant, and, like, Sol would run into the council chamber screaming, the Sith are back, like, no matter how they word it, it's just going to be a total disaster of, like you can't unwalk that. Like, that's like dumping a bottle of water and trying to put the water back in. Like, it is not going to happen. So, like, I think with that in mind, like the writers on the show couldn't have, like, I don't know, I have to give them more credit than that. Like, they're not gonna go that direction, I would say, because I really do think all the good characters get killed, probably. I think Sol's for sure toast. I do think we might, like, maybe, like, I don't know, like, maybe, do they really kill off both twins? Like, maybe. I don't know. It just, there's a lot of interesting directions they could go with this show in terms of, like, those implications, though, like you said, Chris, like, Sol's wanting to get back to the council, and like you mentioned, the interesting thing about Yoda, I think there's credence to that prediction, just for the sole fact that, like, Leslie Headland is, like, hard drawn in the sand, like, oh no, we don't have Yoda in the series. Like, she said that.
Yeah.
She said that a lot. So to me, it's like either she's telling the truth or she just doesn't want, people, like, lingering on that too much and potentially being like, oh yeah, we predicted it. Like, so it's a surprise. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance for Yoda potentially. Like, who knows? What if we get a thing, finale comes around, Plagueis pops in, Yoda, you go cut back to the council, like, maybe Yoda has, like, a Vergence in the Force or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to see where.
Well, here's a question though. Talking about, since we're on, like, the Sol topic and everything, what do you guys think of the whole conversation with Venestra and Mog in the woods? Of, like, would you guys be satisfied with the show if the Jedi would justify it by just saying, hey, Sol's the one that went rogue and killed all the Jedi, but we, if Venestra confirms, like, hey, we killed him, blah, 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 so, we don't got to worry about him, would that be a satisfying enough ending for you guys, like, just to, like, basically have Sol be the fall guy?
No.
See, that's how I feel too. I think that's really convenient. I think that's just, like, it just, you throw a bunch of stuff out there, and then it's kind of like, oh man, are we gonna actually just go down the route of just kind of making him the fall guy?
Yeah, because the guy said Mog was like, oh yeah, was this Master Sol or something?
Yeah.
And she doesn't really say.
No.
She's like, something to tip the scales, which is exactly what she said when Sol came up to her and asked her about something. Where it's like, she has a feeling it's got to be Qimir. She must know he's not alive. She could probably feel his presence through the Force as he was on that planet, like, moments ago before he left or something. Like, she's trying to cover this up so hard. Like, she cannot let this know that she was responsible for all these people dying because of her for not handling her apprentice properly.
Yep.
So again, another Jedi with guilt, and this is why we're seeing Venestra so different than what she was in the books. This cheery, happy-go-lucky Jedi is now downtrodden because she feels so responsible for everything going to crap all of a sudden. It all comes back to her, really.
Well, Chris, I was going to throw this out. So when we were before the podcast, I thought about it when I was listening to the book. I noted it for this Venestra part specifically because I figured you would bring up her mentioning tipping of the scales. Interesting thing, Plagueis used that term like 3 or 4 times in the book, by the way.
What?
Tipping of the scales. Yeah, he literally said tipping of the scales.
Oh,
like
he's got to be showing up. If she took that's such a specific line to just cherry pick and use it 3 times.
Yeah, he used it like 3 separate times talking to Sidious, like saying, Sidious, we need to tip the scales in the balance for this, for the Sith, blah 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 blah. Like, that whole thing when they were discussing like the grand plan, which is what happens in the prequels. So it's just like when I heard that line, I was like, oh yeah, I got to bring that up to Chris because, like, are they forecasting it?
Another thing I want to bring up is just, again, we're almost done with the series. We literally have 2 episodes left. I am now, again, every week that we get further, and I'm seeing, of course, it's a well-written story would be like this. You're starting to see the full picture. You're starting to see things coming together. Now I understand the vision of Leslie Headland. Bringing twins in. Why'd you have to bring twins in? Oh, it's because this moment now where we're getting these sisters' blood literally changing, to the opposite ends of what their twin was, kind of thing. So it's a very unique. I like it. It's a good addition to Star Wars where this is not so simple. It's a little bit more complex because we're dealing with twins, which we've seen many times before in Star Wars. I mean, obviously, like Luke and Leia are twins. You got so many other characters throughout the years, even like things like Legends, like the Old Republic. Yeah. There's those twins and different things. So just adding the idea of like Force sensitive twins is just a cool, unique idea. And one falling on the dark side, one swapping ideologies. Essentially, is what we're starting to see now. So I just wanted to put that out there as like it's cool now that we're in episode 6, starting to really see what the point was with all this.
Right. No, I thought it's a good way to definitely flesh out the Force and get different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like different perspective, and of course we're gonna really like get into that here. Not even this coming week, in 2 days. We'll be getting into it, and it's just going to be interesting to see where they go with it in the flashback because, another thing connecting to the 3rd episode of the series, like, in that episode they talk about like, the Jedi wouldn't be happy, with how Mother Coral like conjured this whole thing up. So it's like, what's up with that? Like, why did they say that line? Like we're gonna see like maybe they I don't know, maybe they get her to like confess for using like Sith magic or like conversing with dark side users or something potentially, because like even no matter how they portray the Jedi in this show, like because they want to portray them bad, obviously. Well, for starters, just because in my opinion, not even like really even from like the hubris side of things and like just like how the Jedi are like known to be eventually. I think a lot of it too is like, if you think about it, the Jedi are getting portrayed in the way they are because this show is supposed to be from a bad guy's perspective. So of course they're going to like be portraying the Jedi even in more of a worse way than what it would be. Like, it's always like the whole thing. I've heard like Milton say it before and here like before about like, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the people who write history are the ones who, like, form the perspective or whatever. So, like, this show is, like, coming from a bad guy's perspective. So, of course, like, you're going to have the Jedi potentially even looking even worse than what they potentially are. And it's just, like, what did they do in this flashback with the village, with the Coven of Witches, to, get this whole feeling of guilt? Like, you have all these people in isolation, and then Sol feeling with all the guilt he has. It's like, what did the Jedi do that's so bad? Because from what we've seen so far, they haven't done anything, bad enough to go and take yourself out like Torben did. So like, we gotta see something. Torben, the worst thing he did was get possessed for like 5 seconds. So like, what really happened? Like, so I think that's the big thing going into this week. Like, they have to give us a really good fleshed out explanation, to like satisfy that story beat.
Hell yeah. Well, I think it's good as time as any to start giving our final thoughts and score out of 10. I'll kick things off for a change. I really enjoyed this episode. I feel like this is, again, as I'm repeating myself again, this is things are coming to a head. We had a nice, great action-based episode. This episode continues to flesh out the characters in more ways than one, adding a lot of lore to Star Wars that we haven't seen before. Interesting locations, some levity again with the little creature there, Basil, and just the awesome kind of the character of Qimir, who has just continually been winning me over with each episode, starting off as a bumbling fool and just being this mastermind that is, just questioning the Jedi in ways that I haven't seen before. So with that being said, I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. I'll throw it over to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this episode and last week's episode are like the start of like where I would want the show to actually be. Like, this is what I was thinking we were going to be getting. In this week's episode, it was solid overall. Like, you have some good moments. All the stuff with Qimir and Osha are excellent. Like, there are no issues there. I do like some of the overall just the different things they did there, like lore building wise, pulling from legends, just different things, of course, like that. And then, I think the weak part of the episode for sure was, the stuff with Sol. I wasn't a huge fan of the way they used Sol and Basil and those sorts of things. That whole ship sequence, and then I know she's barely on screen or anything, but Vernestra's character is just not working out for me. Like, I think her acting is just not good. I don't know if it's just like, maybe that's just like how the portrayal of the character is supposed to be in the book or something in the books, but like her acting just isn't fitting it for me. But it's just going to be interesting to see where they take that beat with the potential framing of Sol potentially. Like maybe that's a thread they carry on into the finale, like just as a fall guy. And overall though, I think the episode was just solid. It was a solid like bridge episode. What for me, it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't good. To me, it was just kind of like another run-of-the-mill Disney Plus solid Star Wars episode. Like nothing special, nothing disastrous. Like just kind of like average for me. But it was a solid way to lead into this potential flashback episode that we're going to be getting here in a couple days. So for me, I would just have to give the episode a just really solid 7.
7 out of 10. And last but not least, Millen, final thoughts and analysis on the episode, man.
All right, so you're 7 out of 10, Chris, or Ben, and what were you,
Yep.
Chris?
I was an 8 out of 10.
Okay. I might be the highest of the group, and that's probably rare. I actually very much enjoyed this episode. I do agree with you, Ben, about Venestra. Her character really isn't nothing special. And again, I don't have that perspective of knowing the books like Chris would understand her better than we would. So
Yep.
I don't really care for her. And you're right, her acting isn't the greatest, very stiff. But that might be just because maybe they're not trying to portray the character in a certain light. I mean, hell, I didn't think Qimir was nothing special those first couple episodes whenever he was being weird and a drunken guy. But now, obviously, that was a swerve. So this could be a swerve. So she could get better in the next 2 episodes, and I could say differently at the end of the finale. Overall, I thought this was a very well done episode. It needed to shift its focus away from that intense battle scene to, okay, let's get some context, let's get some perspective. I felt the pacing throughout the episode was solid, better than the last 4 to 5 episodes of pacing. But overall, I felt this was an episode that was needed. I love seeing more Qimir being fleshed out, his purpose, his motivation. I'm now curious to see how Osha and May will be flipped in their thinking, and I'm curious to see what Sol is going to finally reveal to us what actually happened on that particular at the village with the ladies, so with the witches. So I felt this was a good 8.75 of an episode. It really wasn't bad to me. It really wasn't boring. I thought it was overall the most consistent episode that we've gotten of the series thus far.
There you go. There you go. And as far as Vernestra, she's a lot more passionate, a lot more lively as a younger kid. I think what's going on here is just like in the prequels with some of the acting, I think Leslie Headland's like taking a page out of George Lucas's book and writing her to be so like dogmatic. Like we're seeing this kind of Jedi already 100 years before Phantom Menace. Like she's just so stone-faced, she's emotionless. She's just basically this Jedi that's just so set in her ways and high and mighty. I think that's basically her portrayal right now. Is like over 100 years have passed since we've seen her because she's gone through the Nile tragedy of them just massacring millions of people. She's seen so much since that now she's just like going through the motions and it's just become that way, I feel like.
Well, Chris, I was going to say one thing I can say I got corrected on, which is good. I have to give them credit on, was when Mog was talking to her and mentioned her hyperspace sickness. I was like, bro, like I know that could be potentially a thing in Star Wars, but like, I don't know, you know, it just felt weird at first when they said that, because I was like, man, if we're going to start introducing that as like a thing, like on screen, like I don't know, what are we gonna get, like Anakin when he spins in a starfighter, like he's getting sick from spinning or something, like, so I thought that was weird at first, but luckily I got corrected on that they said that was already built into the lore of the character. Like she already had hyperspace like sickness issues before in prior books or novels.
Yeah,
so I like that they pulled that from the books. I do like that a lot.
Yeah, she has a special like force sensitivity power where through hyperspace she's able to go to different places. Like she can the Thrawn Alliance novels, they have these like Chiss Skywalkers, they call them, and they navigate through hyperspace using the force. She can do the same sort of thing. And we don't really have the answer yet, but she has an ability to like utilize hyperspace travel in ways that other people can't. So she is special in that way. And again, I don't know exactly the answer yet because we haven't gotten there. There's a couple more books left until High Republic is over in early next year. But yeah, I was very excited when they said that. I was like, wow, okay, they are paying very close attention to what's happening, which is really neat.
Yeah, but, I definitely appreciated that. And I do appreciate the Star Wars fandom pulling out all the memes for the Mog character, because for anybody that's seen Spaceballs, John Candy's character is named Barf. He's a half dog, a half man, and you know, he famously says, "I'm my own best friend," and his character's species is a Mog, an MOG, just like this guy. So I've seen so many memes of like the Mog character and then John Candy's character like side by side, like all over social media. So I do appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, so there you go. That's going to wrap it up for episode 160 of Outer Rim Transmission. Thanks for everybody for joining us and listening and watching after the fact. We'll be back next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Same place right here on the Starrapter YouTube channel. Of course, as I said off the top, just look up Outer Rim Transmission on any podcast service. You'll be able to find us and download us so you can listen to us on the go or whatever it is you are doing currently. So, Milton, please plug where the people can find you.
You guys can find me on X at MiltonWeber7 or on Instagram at Milton7Weber. Usually I post a lot of funny memes, workout stuff, just to keep it light and heavy, or not light and heavy, just keep it light and funny on social media. I don't like to take myself too seriously, so check it out. Usually on Twitter, I'm just reposting funny stuff, whether it's about sports, or making fun of our politician choices, because, you know, that's the world that we're currently right now. But yeah, check me out on social media. Let's have a good conversation, good dialogue, and, you know, it's glad to be back and looking forward to these next 2 episodes of The Acolyte. I'm hoping that we get something that's very satisfying, whether this is a one-off season or we get a season 2.
There you go. And Ben.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RealBenMaynard. I'm always talking Star Wars or fitness, or I mean, that's pretty much it at the moment. Star Wars and fitness, so you can connect with me over there.
There we go. So, for Miller, for Ben, for Chris, aka Starrapter, that was 160 of Outer Rim Transmission. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here next week. And may the Force be with you always in transmission.